Having a little variation in the background, even if you want it to read as kind of a solid color, is a pretty good idea. You can do that with changed brush strokes. You can add variation of color, a little bit of gray in here. Let's pull that gray in here too. Should be a little bit darker in there. Let's see what that does. Yeah. So I've mixed some background colors, but I've mixed them using the colors I'm already using. If you're painting this in several sessions, it can get challenging to try to remix your colors the same, but since we have a really limited palette, you don't have to worry about which red you're choosing because there's only one choice. Let's introduce a little of that gray again. This is what happens when you don't rinse your brush. You get other bits of paint coming up, or when you don't change brushes, I mean, or go back to the palette. But in this case, I want that. I want those little bits of paint coming up to give some variation to my background here. At this point, I usually switch to a bristle brush and keep the background really loose. As soon as I've got my main edges worked, that's what I'll do. As I mentioned, it just takes a little bit of an indication where one value meets another to create the illusion of texture. By painting a few little blades of grass, we get the idea that this is a straw and grass. We don't have to paint everything. And if you do paint some blades of grass, just be careful you don't make them all the same size going the same direction. There's a real tendency to do that, and it stands out as the wrong thing once you get it done. Going to refine a little bit here where I went up too high in this shadow. And it's starting to look a little too rhythmic, so I want to make sure that I've got variation. I've somewhat lost the hooves here, but it really doesn't matter because they don't need to show much. You just want it to avoid, you want to avoid the idea that it looks like you couldn't paint them. I'll indicate a little bit more on this one so that it becomes obvious that the others are just covered in grass, which is why they don't show that much. That's standing up too much, so I'll take some of my grass color and blend it down a bit. As I mentioned, the legs aren't as light in my painting as they are in the photograph, but if they need to be a little bit lighter, I can always go in and do that. And I just got paint on my hand. Trying to reach my brushes and they're just out of reach when I'm dancing around this tripod that supports my camera. Okay, I'll just paint along the bottom because it's going to be difficult to get in there with a bigger brush anyway. So I'll get that finished along here. Whoops. So because I've painted really freely around the outside of this painting, around the image, I can now go in and I can add the rest of the background without worrying about getting too close to the calf. So just using a bristle brush, and since there's no underpainting, I will just put it on quite loosely, but make sure I got enough paint in there because there's no underpainting to start the process. These backgrounds can be really soft and opaque, or they can be allowed to be a little more translucent in places just to give variation. Let's scrub in the main background color here. You can leave a little bit of a darker area for an indication of a bush of some kind. You can come in on the other side with some other colors if you like. Not mixed up quite enough of my lightest colors, so I will just quickly do that. Needs a touch of yellow. I've got wet background color right up against the calf, so I can easily come into that without wrecking the rest of my painting. And that will give it some variation in brush strokes as well. And we'll call this little guy done. I can let it dry to sign before I sign it, or I can sign it now while I could still change my signature using the background color if I want. I like to leave the backgrounds just a little bit loose like that. So I'll just step back for a while, look at this a little bit more, see if anything needs changing. But mainly it's done.